Welcome to Swan Analytics. This video is on macro programming in SAS. So we will be looking at the basics to advanced levels of macro programming. Macros are used for doing automation. So whenever we have to write a code multiple times, we can just write the code once and call it multiple times. So it's very resourceful and it saves a lot of time. And the possibility of errors are also reduced because the more code we write, the more likely we are prone to errors, syntax errors. So it's easy and better to write less code and create a macro program and call the macro as many times as required to complete the task. So for example, we have a lot of files, Excel files in this file path. Let me just open and show you the file. So I have in this file path, I have many Excel files and I want to import all these Excel files and convert them into SAS datasets in my work library. So I want to bring all these Excel files into my SAS environment. How do I do that? Instead of writing proc import as many times, I'm just writing proc import syntax once, but I'm incorporating the syntax into a macro block. So when I say macro block, it starts with person macro, and we can give any name to the macro. I'm giving IMP because I'm importing. The whole purpose is to import the files and convert them into SAS datasets. And there is one macro variable I'm creating, which is we can call it macro parameter here. So DS is one macro parameter, and we are giving only one parameter here. So you can see that this particular parameter I'm assigning a value when I'm calling the macro. And remember that whenever we start create a macro, we also write the mend statement. We start with person macro and we end with person end, macro end, mend. So I'm importing this Excel file from this particular location, and the file that I'm pulling and converting it into a macro variable because the files keep changing. It can be cars, next time it can be class, and so on. So the file names are changing, and that's why I'm macrotizing it. Anything that is changing is macrotized, and the rest are standard. And the output data set is ampersand ds. So whatever the Excel file I'm importing, the same file I'm outputting in my SAS environment as a SAS data set. And I think this is already clear to you, the proc import procedure. So let's call this macro. See, I'm able to import this dataset cars from converted into an Excel file into a SAS dataset here. So previously it was Excel file here in the cars. So now this is converted into a SAS dataset. Now I can do the same for all the files. I can do this for all the files. Now, the same thing can be done for all the other files as well. So city, date, class. So let me just do it for two more files. I'm calling the same macro, IMP. So when we call, we don't write macro statement here. We only write the person IMP. So the macro name will be calling multiple times. Only when we create a macro, we write person macro, person mend. And what is this? It's just trying to mention the name of the macro that is ending. This is especially useful. It's optional. It's not necessary that we have to write the name of the macro after the main statement. It's optional. But it is a good practice to write it because when many macros are nested within each other, it becomes difficult to understand which macro is ending. So a macro block may contain multiple macros in complex macros that we use in regular routine work. There are many nested macros, and it becomes easy to understand for someone who reviews the program to know which macro is ending at which point. So it's a good practice to write the name of the macro after the main statement so that we know which macro is ending. So let me run it for the remaining two. Let me call the macro for the remaining two files. We can do that same for all the files. So I was able to input class and city date. So all the files are imported, and I would suggest you try to practice this. If you're a beginner, try to practice it for the rest of the many other files as well, so that you get a good practice. Now we have seen how to create a macro, a local macro variable. We call it DS is a local macro variable that you created when you created this macro. We call it local macro variable because you can call it can only be referenced. This macro variable can only be referenced within the macro, within this macro percent IMP. You cannot reference this macro outside the macro IMP. For example, let me just test it. Percent put. Percent put is used to print it. Now I want to print it in the log window. Percent put. So default is log window. Percent put ampersand ds. You can ignore this asterisk. It's just for giving some space so that the legibility is more. But it's just a character. It doesn't have any meaning apart from that. So when I am try ampersand ds, I want to try to see what the value is outside the macro. I get a warning. Apparent symbolic reference to ds not resolved. So from this, I infer that a macro variable that is created within the macro block can only be referenced within the macro call, within the same macro call, not in any other macros. So this particular we can create macro variables as mentioned using let statement. Person let statement can be used for creating macro variables. So for example, I want to create a macro variable ht with a value of 12. So I can just assign percent ht equal to 12. So it's a very easy step by which we can create a macro variable. Similarly, I have created another macro variable wt with 2.2. So this is a decimal value, this is and other one is integer. Now when I want to say check actually these macro variables can be used anywhere, I can just use percent put ampersand ht and ampersand wt. Whenever you write ampersand, you're referencing a macro variable. So a macro variable that is when you reference a macro variable, SAS will go and fetch the value of macro variable ht from the symbol table. So the macro variable values are stored in symbol tables. So when you create using person let statement, it is stored in global symbol table. But when you create a macro variable ds inside the macro block, this is created inside the macro block. In that case, it is stored in the local symbol table. The macro variable that is stored in the local symbol table can only be accessed within the macro block. But a macro variable created using person let statement, which is a global macro variable, can be referenced or used anywhere in the program. For example, when I am writing percent put ampersand htwt, you can see that these values will be resolved. Just first let me run this to clean up the log window and print it in the log, the values of ht and wt. So you can see ht is 12 and wt is 2.2. So that way it is clear that macro variables created using global macro variables created using person let statement can be accessed anywhere in the program. It need not be inside the macro block. Now, for example, we'll see an application of creating this macro variables, this global macro variables. We have a dataset class in the SAS library, and I want to convert the height in the dataset as height, weight, and I want to convert this height into from inch to feet and weight from pounds to kg. So let me run it and see. So I am writing height divided by macro variable ht. ht is 12. So similarly for weight, divide by 2.2, the macro variable wt. So this will resolve to 2.2 and this is going to resolve into 12. So height divided by 12 and the weight divided by 2.2. This one application of creating these macro variables. I will run it and we can see we have a new dataset class with height in feet, weight in kg. These are the two new variables created. We have seen two ways of creating macro variables using. One is using macro block and other is using person let statement. Let us see how we can create a macro variable using the SQL procedure, proc SQL into clause. So that is the next one. For example, I want to know what's the minimum age of students in the dataset class. In this dataset, I want to know what's the minimum age. Locally, so when we look at manually, we can see that it is 11. 11 is the minimum value. Let's do that programmatically now. So the step is select min of age into, there's a new macro variable I'm creating, which will contain the minimum age of students. And I'm going to print it in the log window using %put statement. So in the log window, you can see I'm getting the minimum age of students. Now this is a macro variable and I can use it anywhere in the program and it's a global macro variable. The macro variable that I'm creating using in the open code, using the into clause in proc SQL is creating a global macro variable. Now we have seen how we can create one macro variable. Can we create more than one macro variable? Yeah, we can. That is select min of age, max of age. I want to know both the minimum and maximum of age of students in the dataset class that we have in the SAS library. So both I am trying to create in the same code. Let's see if we are able to do that. And I'm getting 11 and 16. It's a pretty easy code, very easy syntax. Select min of age, minimum of age, and maximum of age into macro variable min age and max age from class. Now, next is how to create a macro variable, two macro variables from the using group by statement. I want to know number of names, number of males and females. Basically, I want to know the number of males and females. So I can group by sex. So when I group by sex, I get the grouping variable is sex. So males separately, females separately, what is the count? And order by sex. When I order, F will come first, then only M will come. So when you order it, first F will come, alphabetical order F will come before M. So first M, F, and then M. So automatically the macro variable N1 will get the count of, will capture the count of females, and macro variable N2 will capture the count of males because it is ordered by sex. And the first value will be, when we group by sex and order by sex, the first alphabetical order what is going to come is females and it will get stored in N1. Second is males in alphabetical order. and it will get stored in N2. Now let's see what's the count of males and females in the class. So it's showing as 9 and 10 for N1 and N2. Females 9, males 10. Now how to create multiple macro variables using different variables. Now I use the same variable name. Previously I used the same variable age. I use different variables. Can we create macro variables from different variables? Well, let's see we can do it or not. So one of them is height and weight. I'm getting the mean of height and mean of weight from SAS.hard dataset. I want the mean, average, height and weight. So height and weight are two different variables. I'm creating two macro variables, mean height, mean weight, which will capture the values of height and mean height or mean weight. And I'm using the round function so that it can be rounded off to 1 decimal place. So let's check it. 64.8 is for mean is the average height and 153.1 is the average weight. So it's evident that we can create two macro variables from two different variables. Next is get all the values of a variable into a macro variable. Can we capture all the values of a variable into a macro variable? For example, what I am saying is not very clear. So let's say we have 19 students here. Can we capture the values of Alfred into one macro variable? Second macro variable will have the value of Alice. Third macro variable will have the value of Barbara, and so on. 19th macro variable will have the value of William. So can we do that? It is possible to do that. We'll see how we can do that. So let's say I'm taking name, age, height. All the three variables I'm taking. Capturing the values, all the values of name into name 1 to name 19 because the last record is 19th record. So entire from first row to end last row, you're capturing all the values. Similarly, age 1 to age 19, height 1 to height 19. I'm capturing all the values. Name 1 to name 19. Similarly, age 1 to age 19, 19th record. So, and height for first record to height of the last record. Everything is being captured. So how many macro variables will be created? 19 macro variables for name, 19 macro variables for age, and 19 macro variables for height. So total number of macro variables will be 19 into 3. So all the values of name is captured into name 1 to name 19. Similarly for age 1 to age 19, and like that for height. So let's see if we are able to capture the values or not. When I'm printing only the first value and the last record. First record and the last record for that specific variable. Here it is name. Similarly for age. So let's run it. So you can see Alfred to William. All the records are captured. You can print name, ampersand name too. It will print the next value. So I think it is Alice. So for example, if I want to print Alice, I can do percent put ampersand name 2. If I put ampersand name 2, it will print the value of Alice. So you can see it's printing Alice. Like that, you can print. You have created all the macro variables. Name 3. Let's see what is name 3. And it's printing Barbara because Barbara is the third record. So that's how we are able to create all the macro variables. Similarly for age, all the macro variables, all the values are converted to macro variables. For age, you can see here, when I run it, I am able to print everything. Age 1 is, first record is 14, age last record is 15, height, first record is 69, last record is 66.5. So that is how we are able to capture all the values of a macro variable, of a variable into a macro variable. Next is one thing you may have noted here. I'm putting 19 here. That's because I know the last record is 19. But what if I don't know what's the last record, or I would like to automate it. That is, let's say the data got refreshed and we have more number of records now. In that scenario, if we are hard coding it as 19, we are going to lose information. We will not be capturing entire data. So in that scenario, in clinical trials or in any industry, our data may get updated. So today we have worked on one data set. Tomorrow, when we retrieve the same data set, it could have more records because the data got refreshed. In those scenarios, it is important to hard code not to hard code the last record, but to automate it. And how to automate it? We will see that. So for automating it, this is a step for that. So first I'm going to write the select strip, put count of star. So I'm taking the count of all the records using SQL function, count function and star in the bracket. And I'm getting the total count of records into M. Pretty straightforward. We are getting the total number of records. And that's what we are trying to hard code here. But instead of hard coding, I'm going to take the entire number of records, count of the number of records into M. And that becomes a macro variable. And when we are creating select name, same, the rest of the thing is same. Only the difference is whenever you're writing 19, you write ampersand M. That way, the value of the record. If it is refreshed and we have 25 records, it will be 25. So it is going to be dynamic. Automatically, it will collect the total count and place it here. So that way we don't have to hard code it, and we are able to get all the values of the data set into a macro variable. The rest of it is same as this. Please note, there is no difference except that I'm creating an additional macro variable M, which will replace 19 in the previous code. So it is going to replace 19. The rest of the code is as it is. Let's run it. So I'm getting Alfred to William 14 to 15. Everything is same, just then it is being automated now. In a scenario where the data is replaced, there will not be loss of information. So that is all for this video, and we will see more about macros in the next video. So please, if you have not watched the next one, please watch it. And if you like this video, please like it and subscribe it. Thank you.